All right, welcome back to this week's edition of the Rock and Roll Ghost podcast. This week, we're happy to have James Beard Award-winning chef Jonathon Sawyer. He's the chef and partner at Kindling in Chicago. You were born in Chicago, correct? Right,
True
the
story.
area?
I was. It's a far northwest suburb or more of a farm town called McHenry.
Ah,
Drive-in
McHenry.
movie
Yeah,
theater is still there. Yeah.
yeah. It is. It is. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Why? For some reason, I didn't know that until recently. I knew you were a Midwest guy. I just didn't realize the area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
Well,
And I
let's
just returned 4 years ago. Yeah.
yeah, after leaving, you had a few restaurants in Cleveland, and those got closed, and you moved back. What
hmm
what what brought you back to begin with?
I mean, it's a lot, right? I've kind of loved watching Chicago over the past 2 decades become, the arguably the most exciting culinary mecca in America in some way, shape, or form. And having roots here and looking for a life change, post pandemic, or
Mhm.
really during the pandemic, it made a lot of sense. My wife's from Florida, but grew up in Cleveland, so similar sort of Cleveland transplant, and I felt like we had had our run there for a decade, and it was time to continue to sort of evolve and move on and move to a city that was a value add, not just for me and not just for my wife, but for my kids as well.
Mhm.
And that's how we ended up back here in Chicago.
Yeah. Do you still have family here?
I do, yeah. I have
Okay,
some family here, some family in Cleveland, some family in New Jersey, some family in California, kind of all over the place these
gotcha,
days.
gotcha. Um, yeah. So you moved back here. You closed your last Cleveland restaurant, the Greenhouse Tavern, right before it officially became a pandemic, correct?
Yeah, yeah, the two were kind of happening. Um, they were coinciding timeline wise. Yeah.
Right. Pretty hard time to move, yeah, anywhere, honestly. You just came here kind of hoping that you would find something that fit for you, or did you already have some things lined up?
No, I had some options on the table, and I liked the design build that the Four Seasons was putting together for Adorn. So I actually started working in Chicago sort of before we knew about the pandemic.
Okay, gotcha.
I was commuting to and from in March. But I mean, in hindsight, it's you know, the term hard or easy, it's relative, right? At the end of the day, it's kind of just like, what is the next right thing for me to do for my family, for myself and my career? And this became apparent long before the move it was actually made and long before jobs were secured. And it just kind of I weighed a couple options and looked at the value add, and it was now 4 year removed, it was definitely the right decision.
Yeah, besides the last this decade, did you work at all in Chicago before going out in the
No,
world?
no, I was in New York for 5 years, and I was in
Right.
Miami for a little while, and Rome for a little while. But no, I didn't have any professional training in Chicago. I mean, I did a lot of events with Paul Kahn and a couple events with Rick Bayless and David from Elsk. There was a lot of sort of kindredness, especially because Pat Sheeran and I won Food and Wine Best New Chef the same year, and I kept getting nominated in Best Chef Great Lakes with all of the great Chicago guys. I've known Duffy for 20 years. He and I won an award a long, long time ago when our before our kids were even born, back when he was at Avenues and I was still
Wow.
working for Simon. And we've kind of been friends ever since then as well. So there was a lot of sort of narrative threads that pulled me to this city, that a whole life of sort of cooking had sort of brought me to.
Okay. All right. What and if you could kind of talk about how you got involved with 50/50 and specifically kindling, how did that all begin?
Yeah, I mean, my last sort of four concepts I opened, well, if you include this one, five concepts, four of them are wood fire.
Mm-hmm.
And, once the design build was done with the Four Seasons, I was still kind of craving going back to that wood fired. And, now that I'm, 2 years into this project and, whatever the future is, I know it's going to have more wood fire. I just think, I don't know. I can't imagine opening a restaurant again without it.
Okay.
It's the ultimate sort of romance. It's the easiest sort of way to tie together my career from, French training to Italian wife to living in New York and Chicago and Miami. It just makes the most sense for me. And when I met with Scott and Greg and sort of saw the plans and the ambition for the project and sort of heard stories of quote unquote the Loop Renaissance, I thought it was something that was super exciting to be a part of. And, you can't think of a more iconic address, slash zip code slash building to be in
Mm-hmm.
than the one that we're on in the corner of Adams and Franklin, having the first two stories.
Yeah.
And as we finish the design build, it's really proven to be as such.
Yeah. How have the first 2 years gone for you?
Oh, an absolute blessing. I mean, it's an amazing, like all restaurants, there's bits you could do better, there's bits you could do worse in terms of design to operation, but it's amazing to have a 13-foot hearth and to have just such a strong and dedicated culinary team, and FOH team for that matter. But because of where we're located and because of sort of our team, we really have zero turnover when it comes to BOH. We got probably 75% of our opening employees still employed
Mm-hmm.
and still working the restaurant. And I think it's a testament to wood fire and to the, accessibility to the space and to our leadership style.
That's cool. I want to switch gears a little bit, and because I just haven't, I've seen you talk about it, but I haven't seen much written about it. You're sober now.
True.
Can you talk a little bit about what got you there and how sober living as a chef is different for you now compared to what it used to be?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to talk about it. I'm 21 months sober. Let's say this run. I sort of put together a year prior to this. If we go back about 5 years, is when my evolution really started. Then my father passed, and I sort of went back to all of my old habits in a really intense and dark way.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of coincided with the end of our, Cleveland Empire and the pandemic. It was quite the culmination of catastrophes. And then I started to open my eyes and think about, why I was doing what I was doing, and not just in terms of sort of that, that those restaurants I had, they didn't necessarily bring me more happiness, and using didn't bring me more happiness either. And I had to remember and think like, why did I stop becoming, an engineer? Because it wasn't something that brought me happiness. It wasn't something I enjoyed to do every day. I wanted to be in a restaurant that focused and had focus on hospitality and cooking food. And so wanting to return to those roots and sort of, looking at guys that I knew that were sober or sober adjacent, Nate Appleman and Chris Cosentino and Philip Spear and Andrew Zimmern and Matt Jennings, I kind of looked at them longingly, and I was like, God, they seem to be so satisfied with their lives, all very different.
Mm-hmm.
And they seem to be so very happy. And it just always seemed just out of my grasp. I couldn't really, to be honest, look at myself in the mirror and say, this is Food and Wine's best new chef. Or I couldn't look at myself in the mirror and be like, you deserve to win the James Beard Award. You're worthy of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of my own psychosis and my own therapy I'm working through. But that was most certainly coupled by addiction, triphasic addiction, uppers, downers, and disassociatives. And I kind of, my wife, I got to give her a ton of credit early, but before she turned 40, she really turned a corner of sort of personal, spiritual, mental, and physical evolution that I initially was resentful of. And like,
Mm-hmm.
like, what the fuck? What happened to this person that I used to do these? But then I was like, no, no, she's so much more satisfied and so much more ready to be evolved than I am. And I made the decision, as we all know, we can try to help other people as much as we want, but until that person wants help,
Mm-hmm.
it's unattainable. So I
you
just
know.
woke up one day and I was like, no, that's enough of this. And I checked myself into rehab and then into outpatient. And, I find myself happier and happier with this version of myself every month, every day.
Yeah.
Does it mean that there's no problems and I got all my shit figured out? No, there's still there's still life on life's terms. But I
Yeah.
just I don't you know, as the kind of addict that I am, I really just ran away from any emotion, right?
Hmm.
Joy, fear, anxiety, depression. I numbed them out, and
Hmm.
now just saying them out loud and looking at myself and like having the opportunity to feel feelings, they take so much more power away from them. The
Hmm.
worst decisions in my life are the ones that I made out of fear or out of anxiety or out of depression, as we all know, or when I was hungry, for being honest about all of it, right? But
Right.
now, if I take a moment and I say it out loud and I take some of the power out of it and I call a couple people, I don't find myself feeling those things nearly as much. They're of course they're part of the human
Hmm.
experience, but the power that I was beholden to as an addict was so much more intense than it currently is.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you fully sober? No alcohol, no nothing?
No, nothing. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I mean,
Just tea and caffeine, but no,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
no uppers, no downers, no disassociatives.
No, no, no drinking, no nothing. Okay.
No,
It's a
no,
pretty amazing thing to have to do, like, for certain careers, where you're surrounded by it. I know
yeah,
comedians that go on the road have a real hard time because they're, number one, they're cut off from everybody,
yeah.
and there's plenty of whatever the hell they want available to them wherever.
Hmm.
Um, anything like that. But yeah, I've had so many experiences with people in the food business that have had, issues, and it's a hard business to stay sober in, quite frankly. You have to reach a certain point in your head where you can truly be free of that and not have it bother you in any way.
Yeah, I mean, so much of what you just said is absolutely true, right? At the
Mm-hmm.
end of the day, I think the most brilliant, satirists, comedians, chefs, we come from an experience, a life experience that I think is different than everybody else. And I'm not going to say that our trauma is more intense or more specific than anybody else's, but that's what makes you anticipatory in terms of hospitality. That's what makes you so socially observant in terms of comedy. And frankly, the correlation between that and addiction is pretty high, right? And then
Yeah,
at the end of the day, we do have everything at our fingertips. Whether you're a cook or a comedian or a rock star, whatever, or actor. I mean, there's certain professions where the uh, everything is accessible to you. And initially, I think, I don't resent any of it, but like I thought that's how I became quote unquote a rock star chef or a famous chef. I read,
right.
Burroughs and Hunter S. Thompson and Bourdain like they were the lesson plan for how I became a cool badass chef,
Right.
and uh, I love being in this time period now and having the opportunity to look at people like the guys I listed and like myself and be able to say to young culinarians, no, no, that's a cautionary tale. And it
Yeah.
may work for 70% of the population. I doubt it's that high, but it doesn't work for a certain percent of the population. And I'm living proof that it can be a rewarding career in terms of travel,
Mhm.
satiation, happiness without any of those things. And you don't need to have those as a part of your culinary education, quote unquote.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't need to know how to smoke a bowl in front of the hood vent so that no one knows, or hide the cocaine in the fold
Right.
of your chef coat so that you don't need those things. Those are cautionary tales, if not an opportunity for you to avoid. And if I can affect 1 to 2 to 10 people positively and allow them to not have to go through that, then fuck, that's rewarding. Pardon,
Yeah.
am I allowed to swear? I'm sorry.
No,
I
you're
think I've
good.
sworn
You're
twice
say whatever the
already.
hell you want,
My
man. I
bad.
don't.
All right.
Yeah. No.
All right.
Not without getting into anything. I definitely. I come from an addict. My dad was a drug and alcohol addict. And I
Hmm.
never really drank. I never really did drugs. I will admit that since marijuana has become legal in Illinois, I use edibles for anxiety and stuff. But you know, I have enough of an addiction with food in terms of, you know, my weight and everything, that I always say that you
Yeah.
can't really pile on multiple addictions. You know, I have that sanity, I guess, about myself, but I have an addictive personality. I know I do, you know.
Yeah.
I say this often. The funniest joke ever about addiction was from Artie Lang, who said that basically when he was trying to be sober is that if he took a drink, if he took like a shot of Jack Daniels, you know, at 9 o'clock at night, by the next morning he'd be running guns to Cuba. You know,
Right.
it's like
Right.
it's
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
absolute insanity
Yeah.
that is an
Yeah.
addict.
Yeah. That's the truth. And it does run in my family as well. Both of my brothers are alcoholics, and all of the male members of my mom's side of the family had problems. And my father's father was an extreme, like it. Yeah, there is a genetic link and there is a socioeconomic link, and it's for people smarter than me to understand and help solve. But I know for this one person how I can do it. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I think what you sort of tipped on in the beginning too was, nobody's lucky in this sort of life / scenario, but I dedicated a ton of time to myself before I returned. And
mhm,
that's the only way I could have done it. I was
yeah,
terrified to be a public commuter again where I used to drink. I was terrified to be back in the environs where I used to drink and use. And I gave myself 90 days before I returned. And I probably could have given myself 6 months
mhm,
to build up the confidence and the strength and the understanding in my program to get there.
yeah,
And it's different for everybody. Some people don't even need to do what I did, and they just say I'm stopping, and they're still addicted in their own way, shape, or form. But like
yeah,
you said, it's the odds are against us for those that sort of have this disease, this degenerative, eventually, disease of alcoholism and addiction. The majority of us don't make it all the way through without having a relapse or two or seven or 10 or 20 or whatever that
right.
number is.
Yeah, no,
But when you think
I've had
about it, it's
experience with
daunting.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, but you can't. The thing that I love, and I know I'm on a soapbox here, and
No,
I'm
no, no.
sorry if
Hey,
I
no, you
am.
look, positivity is a good thing. So,
Yeah, but if I look at anything that long, if I look at how many more hours I have with my son, or I look at how many times my
mhm,
daughter and I will get to go to a concert again for the rest of our lives, it's a anxiety and depression filled moment. But all I know is that I need to make it another 7.5 hours without having a drink or putting any drugs in my body, and
right.
that's it. And I've sort of taken that idea in the moment, and I know it's I don't know, a little bit obvious, but when you have to live that way sort of for your happiness and your sanity, it becomes a part of your management and your parenting, and allows you to have maybe more patience than you've ever had before. You don't need to have the immediacy of the gratification of you know like an example I used the other day was, especially early on as a chef, I would just be like, fuck it, I'll show you how I'm going to do it, and you're going to do it this way. But
Right.
now being a little bit more patient with chefs and understanding that, today is my day to teach them, not today is my day to show them how good a fucking cook I am. So I'll let them sort of go through, and I'm sure it's excruciating at times, but I'll let them go through a dish 3 or 4 or 5 times when I already know maybe where the answer lies, so that they're asking themselves the second and third and fourth question inside of why this dish is going to work. I already see it. I've already worked it out. It's
Yeah,
already
yeah.
there on paper or in my mind's eye, but allowing them to sort of have these miniature failures builds up their culinary intelligence and gives them the opportunity to sort of get closer and closer to what I think their position eventually should be.
Well, there's no ability to succeed without failure. I think that's apparent.
If it isn't, it absolutely should be. Right. At the end of
Yeah,
the day, there's a million people smarter than me that have made quotes about that.
yeah,
It's not how many times you fall, it's how many times you pick yourself back up. But that's the truth,
yeah.
in this comparative bubble that we find ourselves in. We don't talk about the failures as often as we talk about the successes.
No.
But they're going to be there. They're going to be there 11 to 1, if not 50 to 1, depending on what career you're in. And, having the opportunity to forget about it in terms of viewing it as a failure,
Mhm.
but the opportunity to look at it as a learning opportunity and just keep going is the ultimate thing we can teach those around us, or our children, or our proverbial children.
You were discussing about teaching. I mean, you are in a position now where you're, hate to say this because I hate thinking it, in terms of my age, but you're an elder statesman at this point in the food world.
Yeah.
So, are you comfortable with that? More comfortable with that phase now of your career, whereas before you were the scrappy guy that was trying to make your mark, and now you've made your mark, and I mean, sure, you still have things to prove, I'm sure, but um, you're not probably like you were 10 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if I can answer that other than say yes. I agree with you. Yeah, there's still shit I want to prove, and there's still stuff that old me would be furious about, but new me is kind of like, all right, well, I didn't get mentioned by the Michelin Guide this year. There's always next year.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
there's still stuff inside of there, and while I'm quote unquote, proven elder statesman, uh, there is still a lot more for me to do in my career. I want to get more opportunities, have conversations like you and I are having in a way that's
Hmm.
positive and constructive for the next generation. And then there's day-to-day goals too, with my team and with opportunity that I'm in right now. And a lot of it is honestly, just focusing on sort of where I currently am and saying no a lot more than ever before.
Hmm.
Early on, it was such a second city mentality being from Cleveland. There was also this, insatiable desire for attention. That's the addict inside of me that needs external validation. Otherwise, he doesn't exist whatsoever. But,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
able to look at myself in the mirror now in a way I never could before. So I don't crave that anymore. Well, I want that, and I want that for, myself because I deserve it, but also for my team so that they know they're a part of something as successful as I see
Hmm.
because they're they're in it. They often, as I did in the past, don't realize how much their contribution means to the overall success of the unit and the food and the team. So, yeah, I do still want more of that stuff, but I am way more comfortable and way more patient with, the sort of derivation of perfection each plate of food that we put out is, or each event we do is. And I think that's allowed me to have the stability in terms of the team that we have. That I cannot tell you in my 23 openings that I've ever had a restaurant where 70% of the employees, BOH wise, are still there
Yeah.
16 months later. It just is, it's unheard of. It's an industry, total freak, but it's a testament to sort of having a steady ship and a steady hand and not, you know, um, forcing anything.
Yeah. Well, to get onto a different path here, I mean, you worked closely with Michael Symon for years. You were his one of his sous chefs for Iron Chef, uh, whatever iteration. I think you said somewhere like 100 times, which is pretty amazing. How did you first get hooked up with Michael? I've actually interviewed Michael in the past, and he's a hell of a nice guy.
Oh, he's great. I mean, Michael and I think we're destined to meet each other in some way, shape, or form. But the actual introduction came from Charlie Palmer. When I
Okay.
worked for Charlie in New York, I found out I was having my first kid. I was kind of looking at schools and how you get a kid in a school in Park Slope at that point, but in
Hmm.
New York. And it was terrifying and daunting and expensive. And so we decided we would move home, back to Cleveland, where my wife and I were both raised, to sort of, start anew. And I had a, sort of meeting with Charlie, and I just said, "Hey, is there anybody in Cleveland?" And for whatever reason, on like his office board was a picture of him and Mike Symon smoking cigars, and he was like, "Yeah, I know this guy. You know him?" I was like, "No, no, chef, I don't." He was like, "That's Mike Symon. He's on Food Network. You should watch him." And then I was like, oh shit, I do know this guy. And he's from
Yeah.
Cleveland. And he's a former wrestler. I was still a cigarette smoker at that point.
Yeah.
So Charlie set up a meeting. I staged. We went upstairs to sort of Mike's sort of test kitchen, and we smoked a bunch of cigarettes and talked about wrestling and being Midwest dudes for like 3 hours. And then it was just the rest is history. It was just on.
Yeah. What year did you first meet with him and get started?
Geez, probably 2004.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
early. Yeah, that's
because
pretty early on.
I was with Charlie from 2002 to four. Yeah, it's about
Yeah.
forgive my
No,
ganja
no,
and
no, no, that's
alcohol
fine.
fermented brain. It's coming back to me one day at a time.
That's okay. I operate under similar
Yeah.
problems. So, and obviously you're still good friends with Michael.
Yeah, I just texted him 2 days ago. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we still. I mean, especially because we have our tortured love affair of the Cleveland football Browns and the Guardians and the Cavaliers. We share a lot. Yeah,
Okay. Okay. And like him, I mean, not just the same extent, obviously, but now you're on Food Network a lot. You've gotten into the great circle of Guy Fieri, where you're on
yeah.
grocery games, and you've been on TOC. You were just on TOC, and unfortunately, you didn't get as far as you wanted to.
No, I
Uh,
did not. Yeah,
um,
and Ranch Kitchen, and yeah,
oh
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
this
ranch,
shows.
right, ranch kitchen,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
First, what is Guy like for those of us that don't know him personally, and what is the experience of getting onto this kind of TV where millions of people across the country watch it?
I mean, guys, he's amazing, right? He's a brilliant human being, and the more I get to know him, the more I know about him.
Mm,
He's a huge family guy, but you know, he's when you watch him on shows like Grocery Games and Guy's Ranch Kitchen, a little bit so on TOC, but that's a bigger production. You're watching somebody who's like approving the copy, ad-libbing, producing, directing, talking to cameras, hosting people that have never been on TV before, making them
mm,
smile, making snacks for the audience, entertaining, people that are investors in the show program or channel. And it's all happening with a smile over like a 2 hour period. I mean, it's
mm,
just it's an unrealistic job description if you put all the shit he does down on paper, especially for shows like that. TOC as well, but TOC is a production where I couldn't even tell you how many people are behind the camera and in the production room and in the on set.
yeah, I mean TOC
It's
is
almost
another level.
it is. And my track record on there has proven my adjustment opportunities. But speaking of former self and current self, that's the kind of thing that I would come home from and just, be depressed for days and literally beat
Yeah,
myself up. But this
yeah,
current version of me is like, listen, there's 1,000, if not 10,000 people who would love to lose the way I just lost.
yeah,
There
yeah,
is. And I just could never say that to myself before. But in terms of, being, proverbially back on Food Network, it's a total blessing. And I don't ever take any of it for granted. And I
yeah,
love, being able to express myself there and sort of show my point of view. And especially the way that you and I are talking today, it's coming up more and more as an opportunity for me to sort of just have a little conversation with America about, the evolution of a human being. And
yeah,
it's really quite great to get that opportunity,
yeah,
and then there's stuff that's bonding wise that's sort of like chef summer camp that happen when you're filming with Guy. Like we'll all do CrossFit together or go on a hike together or play pickleball. That's how Stephanie and I hooked up for pickleball.
yeah,
We were partners just in South Beach together. I had never played before in my life. We were on the ranch together and we played
yeah,
every single day after filming. And it became not only a hobby, but a passion of mine. And now we have the team called the Quick Picklers for Stephanie Iser and I.
that's
So
cool.
he's there's these connections that are happening beyond just filming and cooking food together, which is also part of the part of the fun of putting 3 to 10 chefs within a quarter mile of each other, is inevitably we're foraging like Shota and I did last time I did grocery games. We were in
Right.
Santa Rosa finding wild fruit and mushrooms and berries, or we're playing pickleball like Stephanie and I and Antonia and Manit and other people. So he really creates a universe where you're building long-term friendships and relationships that you would never otherwise have the opportunity to build.
Yeah. Well, one thing I used to be a cynic when it came to Guy, and I did worship at the altar of Anthony Bourdain, who I still miss. But
Absolute.
I think we would be in a place today where you would see Bourdain be on TOC as a judge or something like that if he were still around. I think him and Guy were destined to end up becoming friends because if he, but I think a lot of that was the like the Elmoification, as Bourdain would call of Emerald. Back when Food Network kind of first started, it's like there's something about being cynical. There's something about having that edge, but there's also something about seeing people for who they are.
Yeah.
And there was a point with Guy where I saw what I believe the man to be truly, and he's a humanitarian, number one, and he also
Hmm.
seems like a great person just to hang out with.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, as a potential future timeline that we're not currently in, those guys would absolutely be friends.
Yeah.
And I think in the beginning of all, when we talk about when that, you know, comment or conversation started, it was the advent of Food Network, like you said. So people were doing things that they thought that someone inside of a control room or behind a computer thought was good for
Mm-hmm.
this, that, or the other thing, and they were, both following that in some way, shape, or form. But
Yeah.
uh, speaking to both of them because I was lucky enough to meet Tony through Michael Symon a couple of times.
Yeah.
There are times, especially, and let me speak for myself more so. There's times where I'm being a megaphone of who I actually am. Maybe not betraying, this is in the past, maybe not betraying who I actually am, but an amplified version of myself. And
Right.
that's not necessary to television or to the, you know, greater audience out there. That amplification of self sometimes isn't truthful to who you are, even though it is still a version of who you are.
Yeah.
So I think you said it correctly. I think there's most certainly a place where all of the pioneers are sort of getting along and seeing where they've sort of brought this world and how all of their hearts are truly in it.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. I don't know how much longer you have, but I'd like to get a few more in if that's okay.
Yeah, please. Love
Okay.
to.
All right. Well, I brought this up with Chef John Mannion yesterday when I was speaking to him about his new place, Brassereau, and in Westtown. I was asking him about influencers and food media in general, what his thoughts were, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, and if it has any real effect on you necessarily, in your this point in your career or where you're at in your life or in any way, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think they're all important. I think it's easy to sit back and sort of be grumpy about the current state of how you tell your restaurant story, but at the end of the day, none of that complaining or conversation is going to change the future. Right? So
Yeah.
I'm a reality-based guy, right? And we invite a ton of influencers to come in and we think it's important to our business. And is it a cost? It absolutely is. But like all costs, you budget it for next year. And if your budget's over, you change it for the following year,
Yeah.
and it's not about whether I agree with Meta or Instagram or TikTok or society because I'm not trying to be defeatist about it, but I can't stop that train currently. So all
Yeah.
I can do is be a positive part of it for the team that I'm on.
Yeah.
In terms of restaurant reviews and reviewers, I do miss having a professional class of reviewers. I know that there isn't an answer out there, save for maybe uh, a foundation or charity, quote unquote, based, or nonprofit based version of it. Because I don't care if the person's anonymous or not anonymous. At the end of the day, those are all just conversations that didn't really matter. Did you know Frank Bruni or Ruth Reichel was coming in, or did you not know? And were
Right.
they undercover? To me, that didn't matter. Somebody coming in who has dined, who is a true gastronome, who's dined around the world, who's
Mm-hmm.
knows technique. Maybe they have some professional training, and then they come in and they eat your vision, and then they maybe do it a couple of times, and then they write something about you. I mean, that is hyper important, and
Right.
it's, as we both know, it's a dying part of the industry. It's either paid for by somebody else, so you need to carry them in order to get on their listicle, um, or it's another version of that, and
Mm-hmm.
there isn't the days of 4 or 5 publications inside of a city that has more than 5 million people that you want to nail your quote unquote review for, to make sure that you start off on the right foot. It's less important than it used to be. I still find it wildly important, and I know all 3 of our reviews, from when we opened, and we took them all to heart, and we had huge conversations with our teams about them. And in the case of one of them, we had some team changes that happened right afterwards. But
Okay.
um, I'll be no names, not specific about it. But
Right.
I do. I believe in a professional, informed opinion, and
Yeah.
I value it. And maybe it's the romantic or the old man in
Yeah.
me that misses the time in New York where, like, that was what we talked about. That was like the beginning of Eater. Part of that was just like talking about who was going to get reviewed, what the
Right.
reviewer was doing. There was so much mystique and cachet behind the people who were, sort of shepherding the reviews and the food stylings of the Times and the Journal and Time Out New York and New York Magazine. I mean, these were
Yeah.
4 things that you had to nail to be successful. And as Jean George proved, if you got 3 stars where people thought you were going to get 1 star, it changes the entire trajectory of a restaurant.
Right.
And as, I don't know, bananas and caviar proved, if you got 0 stars and you're supposed to get 3, no one remembers you, save for
And
nerds like me.
I've never heard of bananas and caviar before. I'm gathering it was a New York spot.
It was. I'll leave the chef's name out of it, but
That's fine.
they
It's a hell of a
they
name
didn't get
for
a
a
friendly review.
restaurant.
It was a terrible name as well.
Holy
Beautiful
crap.
project.
I'm sure. I'm sure they spent millions on it too. Oh man. Man, people and their money.
Yep.
All they had to do was focus on maybe a name change and some other things. They might have been okay.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I had a question and I completely forgot it now after all I have in my head is
Sorry.
all I have is a dollop of caviar on top of an open banana, which just sounds
And you're
completely
like, how can
disgusting.
that taste good? I still don't understand it to this
It
day.
sounds like a
I don't
guy's
understand how
grocery
that
games
tastes good.
challenge.
Yeah, it could
The whammy
it could the
ingredients are
randomizer
bananas
could
and
have given
caviar.
someone. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
well, okay,
Yeah.
let's talk about
Uh,
when you do have time to go somewhere else to eat. Where do you go to eat? Where do you
yeah.
like? And mention
I mean, I
anything. You
love
don't have to
Elsk.
mention just the friends.
Yeah. No, listen, I'm wildly loyal, and there's a reason why I'm here. But I love Elsk. I love David and Anna. I think their
Mm-hmm.
food is inventive, if yet approachable. John and Karen won Food and Wine Best New Chef same year as I do, so I love to go to the Smith and Loyalist. I mean,
Yeah,
really Loyalist more often, but I love to see those too. Curtis is a friend, a dear friend, and I
yeah,
dine with him at least twice a year, which is a lot for me.
yeah.
So those are sort of, check the box for all the friends. I think Avec the OG is also just, I
Oh,
don't know. It's
Vec.
it's it's a snapshot of a perfect design for a perfect address for a perfect
I could
concept.
never.
I
I
mean,
don't think I
just
could handle it if a Vec ever closed.
I don't. Yeah, I would revolt. I would flip a table over in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah,
And it's still as true of an expression of a simple menu, sourced like a motherfucker and just executed out of a nice oven. I mean, it's
it's the
so Paul.
it's the
It's just
perfect
so great.
embodiment of what cooking in the 2000s, the ideas behind cooking in the 2000s went to in its
Yeah.
simplest form. And it's
Hmm.
such a tiny place. And I know they've got the
Hmm.
bigger one, now, but the to be in that spot, to be in a vac is truly a magical thing. And I don't know if I've really followed Paul's other places as much since they've gotten bigger, but it'll never take away how I feel about a vac, any other
Yeah.
feeling.
Yeah, it's
It's
absolutely one of one. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I love to
What
go to Mitsuya Market on
Okay.
Saturdays and Sundays because it is packed and the produce and the fish is insane in the market, and the little sort of food cafe with all of the individual different sort of concepts from
Yeah.
donburi to yakitori to ramen. It's almost transportive, back to my time visiting Japan. And I love to be in a busy, bustling place where there's rules and some people are grumpy. And, like I love
Yeah.
that like edginess of like people not being territorial, but just, you're in somebody else's space and you got to be respectful if you want to try to
Right,
fit in a little
right,
bit.
right.
Um,
Yeah.
and I had the same thing with Argyle. I love to go to Argyle Street on the weekends, and
Hmm.
I can name 6 or 7 places I like to eat there, and the Super
Yeah.
H Mart in Niles I love as well. It's the
Yeah.
biggest. It's my favorite place to shop for fermented and produce.
How often are you doing like I don't know, things like food and wine, events and stuff that takes you around the country these days? Are you doing it like as much
Yeah,
as you used to, or
I don't know if I could make that compare. Probably less overall.
yeah,
And I've gotten better, especially in this version of myself of just saying no, So I'll do basically one thing a month, and
yeah,
that's about it. So I just did South Beach a couple weeks ago.
yeah,
And at the end of next week, I go to Sun Valley to do that food and wine fest, and I don't do anything until actually I film Guy's Grocery Game again in April.
okay,
And I already have my June booked, so I'm saying no to everything in June. And I already have
yeah,
July booked, so I'm saying no to everything in July, but I'm open in August. So like
yeah,
I'm looking that far out, and I think it's important for my sanity, for my sobriety, for my family, and for my restaurant that I don't, I could easily have said yes to 3 things in April, and I didn't,
yeah.
and one of them is a very good cause and a very dear friend whose son has an affliction that the cause benefits, and I have to be able to put boundaries up and say, no, I can't
Well,
help
well,
you this
let's at
year.
least mention who
Yeah.
they are and maybe if you have any of the information, or I could include it, but
Oh yeah.
let's mention
Yeah.
it so that at least something
Yeah.
happens.
Well, it's Autism Speaks to Wall Street. It's a great event, and and they put together an unbelievable set of chefs and a ton of money to help find more solutions for anyone on the spectrum. And they
Yeah,
always bring the most fantastic speakers and guests who have benefited from their um, various charities that benefit from it. And I didn't have enough notice this year, and I wasn't able to time it out. So I'm sadly going to miss it this year. But hopefully next year I'll be back there in April, and I'll be able to sort of be a part of it again. And I
awesome.
swear every time I've gone, similar with Alex's Lemonade Stand, Philly especially, when they really talk about who they are and what they do and how their founding story happened, there's not a dry eye in the room. Everybody is in tears. And I like being a part of something that's massive like that, where everyone's feeling the same emotion at the same time. So it's one of those few times, not one of those, it's one of those times as a chef where you can feel like you're a part of something bigger and something positive.
Mhm.
And that's good. We all deserve that.
Yeah, no, I think it's commendable too on your part that you're you know what you need and you need and to not overwhelm yourself outside because life on its own is overwhelming and the last thing you need is something to put you back on a bad path.
Absolute
That's
truth.
yeah.
Absolute truth.
How cool is it though, these events though, that where you do go get to see people that your friends, sometimes you cook in the same damn city, you don't even see them, but you see them in an event like
Yeah.
that.
That's funny because that's Sarah Gruenbergener. And her and I's joke is that we see each other in Palm Beach or South Beach more often than we see each other in Chicago.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, but it is great. And I love I'm an honest guy, as you could tell. We're having a very vulnerable, candid conversation here. But when I'm with my peers, it's the same thing. And I love to have the opportunity to ask them, like, hey, what are you doing for FOH managers? Or hey, what
right.
site are you using now? Or what are you doing for restaurant week? Or, like having an opportunity to have that direct conversation with them is irreplaceable.
It's awesome. Okay, I got two quick ones, and then I will definitely let you go. So I appreciate you taking your time today.
Of course.
One is okay. We've talked about restaurants. When you do have downtime that isn't necessarily family related or anything like that, is there anything that you do in the city or around, whatever you do that's for you, that's aside from work and family and all that? Is there anything you hobby or something you go do?
Tons. Oh my God. So I kind of I do at least one museum a month because Chicago is so magnanimous with having great museums. So I just did the Field Museum last month. I'm doing Science and Industry in a couple weeks here, and I just
Okay.
kind of rotate through those. That's just kind of my wife and I how we love to spend a Saturday or Sunday. We're members at MoMA. We're members at the Institute of Art. So even if it's one that we just, it's typically about a 5 month cycle to get through all the museums if you're just going once a month. Uh, I'm a live music maniac. I just saw Zach Bryan 2 nights ago. I
Okay.
just any music I can go see with a friend, I'm so down with.
Yeah.
I was in orchestra for years, but I also grew up a punk and a sort of industrial, sort of heavy kid. But I was also a '90s kid, and I have a teenager, so I'll see
Yeah.
everything. Like I said, from Zach Bryan to Lady Gaga to Alt J to Portugal the Man. Like bring
Right.
it all.
Right. Right.
And then I get out in the woods a lot with my dogs, especially in spring, summer when I could do some casual foraging. I used to be fanatical about my foraging, but now I'm more of just I want to have enough chanterelles to last me a whole year. So if I can get 40 pounds when I'm in season, I can and dry enough that I have them for the whole year. And when we get to black trumpet season, I won't have enough for the whole year, but I want to have as much as I can have. So you know, when we get to ramp season, a couple weeks from now, I'm going to be out in the woods a whole ton.
Yeah. I was gonna, you when you start talking about foraging, I know that ramp season is about to hit us, and
Hmm.
Chicago goes crazy for ramp season. What? How do you put that on your menu, or do you not put it on your menu and you just do it for yourself?
It's a little bit more selfish foraging, but I'll bring it in and share with my chefs or share it with friends of the restaurant. We have 13 seats that sit at the hearth, so a lot of times they'll get dishes that nobody else in the restaurant gets. And it's
Gotcha.
more of thanks for dining here at the fire with me. Here's
Gotcha.
some ramps and romesco.
Yeah.
Um, I wouldn't serve any of the mushrooms, even though I'm wildly good at identifying them, especially at my old age. I really don't bring any of those in for the restaurant. It's just not
Gotcha.
worth the social liability that it is, even though there is very little risk when you're only picking shelf likes and chanterelles.
Yeah. Well, last I just gotta ask. I mean, what do you have to look forward to this year? What is there anything significant that you're looking to do, either with the restaurant or personally? Is there something on your calendar or goal or something like
Both.
that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, June 3rd is my 2 year of sobriety date. I'm super excited to day by day work my way to that and put that feather in my cap. And we got a huge menu change here in the restaurant that coincides with our patio opening March. We're going to soft open it here at the end of March. So I'm really excited to see 5,000 more square feet be available to us here.
Mm-hmm.
It's right on the Adams side. It overlooks the bustling street, especially during sort of commuter times. And it's just a beautiful little patio on the second floor.
Okay. Yeah, so this is a pretty big spot. I guess I keep forgetting how huge this seems to be.
Yeah, and it breaks up a lot of people come in and don't realize how big it is until a couple visits in because the second floor isn't super wide open and the first floor has sort of three different little sections from the bar area that you can sort of see from the Adams side to the private dining room to the kitchen. They're all segmented in a way where you always feel, intimate in its own way.
Yeah. How big of a menu change are you looking at?
Well, 10 items. Yeah, so that's a lot,
Yeah.
for us. So that's a big flip anticipating spring. And we got a market card change comes right behind that a couple more days later.
Yeah. What's a menu item you can't get rid of at this point?
Wow, there's a lot. There's a lot of them. I mean, that's the joy and sort of bane of being successful is,
Well, it's like a
you
vet with
know,
the dates. I mean, the dates are never going to
dates.
leave.
I know. I know. Crispy confit of chicken wings. I've been doing them for probably 15 years now. They almost never leave my menu.
Yeah.
For Kindling specific, the burger that we do is wildly successful and very unique to us in that it's never cryovac. It's ground fresh 6 days a week. We get delivery 6 days a week from like the most Polish Chicago butchers you could ever imagine. They double park in front of Willis Tower, come in their meat smocks, and drop off 3 cases and kind of just look at you, and you're like, okay, all right, burgers are here, the menu's ready. But it's on a wood fired plancha, so you get the smoke of the wood fire, but you get the technical sear of a plancha. And I would also say our crispy Brussels sprouts haven't left the menu since we opened our doors either.
Yeah.
Fish sauce, lime juice, charred chilies, garlic, classic combination.
Okay. All right. Well, Jonathan, I really appreciate you taking the time today. I'm sure I could probably throw a few more dozen questions at you and chat with you for a while, but I know you're
Yeah, we
busy.
could do this for hours. Yeah. Yeah.
But I really
Let's do it
appreciate
again
you.
sometime though.
Yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm going to try to come in this spring at some point. So I hopefully I'm not there on a night you're not there. Um,
Yeah.
but it would
Yeah,
be
send me
nice
a
to
note.
just
I would love to
say hi.
connect.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And good luck on everything. Good luck on keeping sober. It's really good that you're on that path, and I appreciate that for you.
I thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. I really appreciate your candor.
All right, thank you. You have a good rest of your day.
You too, brother. Thank
All
you.
right, bye.